Hasnault. I'm the Executive Director of Mead Botanical Garden, Inc. And on behalf of the Winter Park Land Trust Tree Committee and the Mead Botanical Garden Board and staff, welcome to Tree Time. This has been in the works for quite a while, and a lot of planning has gone into it, and seeing your faces tells me that I think it's been a rewarding evening so far. So thank you, Catherine and Ron, for helping us with the tours. But first, I would like to ask, do we have any first-time visitors to Mead Garden here tonight? All right, well, look at you, look at you. Maybe first time since the hurricane. But well, we welcome all of you back to Mead Garden. And this is Winter Park's Mead Garden's 84th year. We're heading into 85 in January, and it's a 48-acre botanic garden and urban oasis. And aren't we glad it's deed restricted to forever remain this way? Yeah. Quickly, I'd like to take a moment to recognize some of our elected officials who are here with us this evening. We have Todd Weaver, who's never been here before. And Commissioner Sullivan, I saw you come in. Thank you for being here. And I'm not sure, I haven't seen Chris Crusada or Coach Russell yet. And of course, Sheila DeCiccio, our mayor. Thank you. All right. And so she'll be participating on the panel discussion in just a few moments. But also this evening we have on our panel Josh Nye, who is the Assistant Park and Recreation Director, as well as Certified Arborist. Thank you, Josh. And we also have Catherine Bowman, who many of you all met already this evening. Catherine is the co-owner of Bowman and Blair, who also met Ron Blair, her husband, who did the other part of the tour. And Catherine is also a past state president of the Native Plant Society, been president of the Tarflower chapter here, and we could not be happier to have her on the board of trustees for Mead Botanical Garden, Inc. So thank you, Catherine. And that fabulous handout that you have, the tree resource guide, Catherine and her staff, Amanda Osley, put that together just for you so you could buy some great trees and nativize Winter Park. Is that a word? Maybe not. Never mind. So, all right. But thank you all for participating in the walking tour, and we were delighted so many of you all were able to do that. So exactly a week ago, do you remember where you were? Hunkered down? Well, I certainly was, and I was wondering what on earth was happening out at Mead Garden as the hurricane thankfully didn't blow too hard through here. But I am very happy to report that while the creek is quite high, and it did indeed crest, we only lost, I think, four trees here at Mead, maybe a few more. But nothing compared to back, I think it was Irma, when we lost 42, and that was the year we celebrated Woodstock Winter Park, and we were calling it Woodstack Winter Park because there were a lot of trees down. But you would probably never know, because just look at how many beautiful trees there are here, and Josh and his staff have been replanting, and our volunteers have been caring and tending for it. And so we're so grateful, Josh. Thank you for your partnership. So with that, so tonight is all about trees. And before this evening, I did take a moment and really was reflecting on trees and trying to remember when was the first time I was really even conscious of trees. And frankly, it was in Tampa. I lived over on Davis Island in Tampa, and we had all these palm trees. And I remember jumping on the shadows of the palm trees. I also remember a friend throwing a sparkler up in the tree of a palm tree. We had a great big sparkler, but the next year it came back more beautiful than ever before. So I don't recommend it, but it worked. But you know, I also was thinking about trees, and I lived in Kansas, and my grandfather was a wheat farmer in western Kansas. There were not a lot of trees out there, but I remember him sitting under cottonwood trees and talking crops and all kinds of combines, things like that. So it was really refreshing when I moved to Winter Park and saw this incredible, beautiful tree canopy back in the early 80s. And I saw for the first time a yellow tabebuia tree, and you guys know the one I'm thinking of, over on Via Tuscany, and it is still standing and still beautiful. And that's because someone had the insight to plant that tree all those years ago and care for it. And so trees. They bring us shade and they bring us beauty. But since I've been here at Mead Garden, I've learned much, much more about the habitat they provide for migratory birds and wildlife, as well as the health benefits that the trees bring us. And we certainly saw that in abundance during COVID year, when the garden was just full of people coming out here and breathing with the trees. And that amount of visitation has really sustained, and we've seen so many visitors, about 60,000 a year, come and enjoy Mead Botanical Garden. Wow. So we are thrilled about that. So there's lots to love about trees, there's lots to love about Mead Garden and Winter Park. But one last word before I hand it over to Leslie. And I have mentioned Mead Botanical Garden, Inc. a few times here in my comments. And for those of you all who may not know, Mead Botanical Garden, Inc. is a nonprofit organization that was formed about 20 years ago to steward and curate and care for and shepherd the garden. And we've been doing that in partnership, a public-private partnership with the city of Winter Park. And it is such an honor and privilege to serve the citizens of Winter Park and their friends and visitors in this capacity. And so we're looking forward to doing that with you all for so many more years to come. But we delight in being able to serve our visitors that way. And I just really want to quickly introduce Emily and Valerie and Olivia, our team, who has been working hard today. Thank you. As well as the Winter Park Land Trust Tree Committee has been amazing and fabulous to work with. So with that, Dr. Leslie Poole from Rollins College. Come on up.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here tonight, and we are so happy that the Winter Park Land Trust could collaborate with Mead Garden in such a wonderful event. Our tree committee is dedicated to trying to raise public awareness about what trees mean to us and what the importance is of the Winter Park tree canopy. I think we're all here because we want to get the park in Winter Park, right? And so I urge, if you're interested, the Winter Park Land Trust, we have a table over here. We have information. We're a nonprofit that are dedicated to trying to bring as much green into the city as we can and to maintain the green that we have, because we think that that's really what makes Winter Park special. So we're really glad to see all of you here. I think I have to do a little shout out to Mead Garden for all the work that they did. My tree committee, everybody raise your hand on the tree committee, because they worked hard. And I have to thank my colleagues at Rollins College who've come tonight, and students too, so who are all expressing interest in this issue as well. So what I want to do now is I want to introduce each of our speakers, and then I'm going to ask each of them to give us a brief description of what they think the importance of trees is in Winter Park, and let them have an opportunity. And then I'm going to throw a couple of questions, and then we're going to take questions from the audience, because I'm sure most of you have probably better questions than I do. So join with me. Mayor Sheila DeCiccio is an attorney, community volunteer, wife, and mother who has lived in Winter Park for 41 years. She earned her law degree from the New England School of Law. She began her legal career in Plymouth County as an assistant district attorney, where she honed her skills digging into the facts and conducting in-depth research to prepare for trial. And if you haven't read her regular emails about what's happening in the city, then you have missed a real opportunity to really learn more about it, thanks to her, to those investigative skills as well. She is a member of the Winter Park Rotary, Winter Park Land Trust, Council of 101, Orlando Museum of Art, and has many community board and engagement and activities as well. And she and her husband Dan have 2 grown children, and they enjoy lakes, parks, and the overall charm of Winter Park. And she is our first female mayor of Winter Park. Josh Nye is an ISA certified arborist and qualified tree risk assessor. He was a consulting arborist before joining the city of Winter Park, where he has served as an arborist, superintendent of urban forestry, and currently is the city's park services manager. He is the man who knows what's happening with trees and parks in Winter Park. And finally, finally, Catherine Bowman spent her early years roaming the longleaf pine communities, coastal habitats, swamps, blackwater streams, and the pitcher plant bogs of Northwest Florida. Her 30-year professional career as an ecological consultant is founded on an education in botany with a BS in botany from the University of Central Florida and a focus on field botany and plant ecology. She's president and co-owner of Bowman and Blair Ecology and Design in Oviedo. And Bowman and Blair works with property owners, builders, engineers, and architects to identify wetlands and listed species and assist with environmental permitting. She is the Tar Flower chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society's Mead Garden Committee chair. For the past 10 years, she's worked with volunteers to create collections of plants that would have grown beneath the longleaf pines and sand live oaks before the establishment of Mead Botanical Garden. And let me just, on a personal note, say, when my husband and I were thinking about putting a native plant garden in our yard, I emailed the Native Plant Society, and the woman was on my doorstep within hours. It was amazing, and we have a native plant garden that we've had for many years that's, we're trying to be the model for the neighborhood, so we'll see how that goes in the long term. So what I'm going to ask each of our panelists tonight to do is to briefly tell us about why they think trees are important and important for Winter Park as well.
Okay, thanks for having me here tonight. I think on a personal note, and I think for a lot of other people here, trees allow me a chance to connect with the sort of fascination with nature and how incredible it is. Kind of let you connect with maybe some of the wonder that you have inside you that maybe daily life strips away from you over the years. And if you take a moment, especially like in a place like Mead, and take a breath, look up, and oh yeah, that's a longleaf pine, and here's what I know about that. It reminds me of the fascination that I had becoming an arborist. Learning about how trees work from a biological perspective. It's hard to fathom how different they are from us, and yet they're so close to us all the time. And they're just kind of like waiting around for us to remember that they're there and that they are incredible. So that's on a personal note. From the perspective of a municipal arborist, they have so many important functions for the city of Winter Park, whether it be stormwater uptake, cooling effects, wildlife. I'm sure many of you would, the list goes on and on of all the different ecological effects. For people that are not as turned on by that kind of green, they also save us a lot of money by performing those types of functions. When I'm interacting with my colleagues within the city who are in charge of other types of infrastructure, I really try to inculcate the idea with them that trees in an urban environment are an infrastructure in and of themselves. They're not just an inconvenience that makes it harder for you to repave your road or redo your water lines or keep your electric on. They are an important aspect of the overall picture of what makes it nice to live in a livable urban environment and a nice community.
Thank you, Josh. I cannot tell you how much we love him, and really the city depends on him. When I go to meetings with other officials from other towns, and I say I'm from Winter Park, they go, oh, Winter Park, the beautiful Winter Park, and then they don't want to hear from us anymore. As you know, Winter Park is passionate about our trees. The state passed a statute in 2019 and amended it in 2022, impacting Winter Park's ability to regulate tree removals on residential properties. In response, we passed the Tree Preservation Ordinance to give guidance at the local level to Winter Park as to what trees can be removed, what trees require a permit for removal, and the steps necessary to obtain the permit to meet the requirements. And I think the whereas clause in the ordinance, and if you ever are having trouble going to sleep, I shouldn't say it, I have it here. It's about 80 pages, small writing. But it sets out very succinctly why we love our trees. It states, the city recognizes that properly maintained trees and landscaping increase property values, filter air pollutants, maintain the natural ecology, temper the extreme temperatures and climate changes, reduce stormwater runoff, and moderate erosion of topsoil, and otherwise help create and maintain the distinct identity and visual character of the city. So pursuant to the ordinance, certain trees can be removed anytime without a permit. They are cherry laurel, palms, fruit trees, any tree with a DBH, I had to look that up, that's diameter at breast height, of less than 6 inches, shrubs such as podocarpus, and any protected trees that have fallen due to storms or natural disasters. Protected trees are any live oak and bald cypress. These trees can only be removed if they create an unacceptable risk. A permit is required to remove them. And the ordinance then goes on to provide very specific guidelines defining risk, which a certified arborist determines, and they will provide a tree risk assessment documentation set by the Society of Arboricultural Best Management Practice Trees and Risk Assessment. And that's the only way you can take one of those trees down, is you have to have a certified permit to do it. And Josh, if there's any questions, and I can answer those questions for you as to what it's going to take. But we're very protective of our trees. They do so much for this city, and we love them. And as an elected official, and I can say this for sure to Todd and Marty, we are working very hard to maintain our tree canopy. Thank you.
I think I would have to echo a lot of what Josh said about the sense of calm and quiet and peace that you get when you're in an area where it's got trees. We and our company work in a lot of subdivisions, for example, where everything is clear cut. And some of those lots, they have allowed trees to grow, and they've allowed their native forest to remain at least on part of the lot. And it feels very different to go to a wide open space that's all green, no shade on the house, no wildlife in the yard, because they don't have trees. And compared to trees that have been preserved on their site, that offer shade, that offer a cooler environment than just a few feet away where there are not any trees. And the importance of trees to wildlife can't be underestimated. Anyway, when I think of trees in Winter Park in an urban environment, I think of trees in the lots that we live on. And when I look out my windows or I come home at night, I see so many species of birds. And I know that it's critical for us to have not only trees, but a diversity of trees. And I think that that's what Josh and the Mayor DeCiccio are talking about as well. We value trees and their diversity throughout the city, and we all should do that on our home properties. One thing that I look for is not only a diversity of trees that add to the beauty of our property and the property values and provide shade and help to keep our homes cooler and shaded in the summer, is that there are a diversity of native trees, because without a number of native trees, we're not going to have the food for our birds. Birds need a diversity of native plants in order to lay their eggs on, in order to find caterpillars that their young will need to live. And so those caterpillars only occur on native trees and shrubs and wildflowers. So if we're having a diversity of trees in our neighborhoods, it's important for us to mix some of the beauty that we like to see in flowering trees with some of the benefits of the native trees as well.
Thank you. Before I ask my next question, I just want to let you all know that there's going to be a tree giveaway tonight. So you have to stay till the end, and we'll be doing a little bit of a raffle surprise. My question now to the panel, and I'll let you each answer individually, is what do you think is the greatest threat to Winter Park's trees in our tree canopy?
I think there are a number of threats, and I am not well versed in the city's permitting, but I would say that one great threat is the fact that homeowners coming in and building larger houses, building newer subdivisions, are clearing trees perhaps more than is really necessary. I don't know the details of that, and that was a blanket statement, but I feel like trees are going down that maybe could have been reconsidered. And I also think that we need to make sure that we're putting the right trees in the right kind of soil environment so that we don't have to use a lot of resources. So a lot of our trees maybe are planted in an area where we've not considered or don't know to consider the soil conditions or the soil moisture conditions, and those trees are not thriving. So one of the threats is putting trees in spots where maybe a different tree species could have been a better selection.
So the wrong tree in the wrong place.
Wrong tree in the wrong place. Wrong tree in the right place? Yeah.
Okay.
Residential development, hands down, is the biggest threat to trees in Winter Park. And you know, that's not to say that people should not have the right to have the reasonable enjoyment of the property that they own within the rules that are laid out by the city and on up. But it's just the nature of the beast. The footprints of houses are permitted to be a certain size, and land's very expensive, and so you know it's obvious why it happens. So it's really incumbent on us to craft ordinances that we can use to protect the trees that we can, and while still allowing that reasonable enjoyment of property, and to do it in a smart way, not just say, you know, you can't do this full stop, but more like, if it's possible to save a tree within reason, let's work together to try to find a way to save them. So that to me, that's easily the biggest threat, and it's not one that's easily tackled, and it's not one that's specific to Winter Park. It's a broad trend across the whole country, and it's one that we're all grappling with. It's not really a problem we can plant our way out of either. It's just not the same to say that you cut down a tree and replant one. It's important that happened, but it's not an equivalence. And so to that end, helping people understand, as Catherine was saying, some other options from maybe what people are expecting when they see that they have to replant trees. If our staff can help to advise on like, here's where we can get the most bang for the buck in terms of the benefits that trees provide, but not have it be that in 10 or 20 years, now we've made you plant a tree that's going to be causing problems for your home. That's best for everyone. So in a difficult situation, you know, we want to try to work together and not work in a spirit where we end up turning trees from an asset into a liability. It can be really tricky sometimes, and I'm a homeowner too. You know, there's scenarios where, as an arborist, I've you know, enforced the ordinance in ways that I can understand as a homeowner that might be difficult for you, and I might not like that if I was a homeowner either. But I'm there to implement the ordinance that was put in place by the representatives of the people of Winter Park, and you know, when things get difficult from there, we have appeals and other means for people to take their concerns about their use of property up the chain, and you know, we're a democratic society and we deal with it that way.
So let me add in here that on our tree committee, we have an attorney who has done extensive research who reports that Winter Park actually has one of the most difficult or stringent tree ordinances in the state of Florida. But even then, I know a lot of you have been telling me tonight that you're concerned about tree removal. So we'll get to that in a minute, but let's now let the mayor answer that question.
You took the words right out of my mouth. And in fact, I was flipping through the ordinance to say just that. We have, and Josh and Catherine are right, it's residential development that's really taking down the trees. They want a huge house, as much house as you can get, and unfortunately they're taking down the beautiful cypress or the live oaks. So what we've got in place are hefty fines, and you have to replant. So if they just take it down, they're gonna be fine. You're gonna be fine, because we have a whole permitting process when you're going to get your certificate of, all the way through the building permits, and you're okay, and they see the trees taken down, immediately Josh gets a call. They go out. So we fine thousands of dollars depending on that DBH that I mentioned earlier, the diameter of the tree. Also, we require replanting, and it may not just be one tree they have to replant, it may be 2 or 3. So there's a number of things that we can do and that we are doing, and you are right, people get angry, and we have to do it. I mean, so, and it's very frustrating because people say, oops, we didn't know, oh, like, too late, you know, they'll take it down, and then what are you gonna do? We fine them, again, hefty fines, and we make them replant.
All right, I think we're ready to take some questions from the audience. Oh, we've got a couple. I don't know if we want to do that. Can you speak loudly, sir? Question.
So I had a couple questions. One is, you talk about restricting tree removal. To me, the program to provide the citizens with trees to plant, you know, you give away free trees, people will come. And one of the frustration I have is that they tell you, we're going to give you this oak, but you're not supposed to plant it between the street and the sidewalk, right?
Okay.
And the reason is because the roots are going to come up eventually and hurt the street. Is that the reason why?
So you mean like through the community canopy program?
Yeah. Because I think I love a neighborhood like Waterbridge, where you have the street, you have the oak trees, and then you have the sidewalk, and you have the canopy, and to me, that's heaven. And are you allowed to plant the trees that you give away between the sidewalk and the street?
So there's no hard rule about doing that. It's more of so there is in the code that, you know, how do I put it? We would rather be involved in making decisions about how trees go in, but people do stuff in the right of way all the time. And the vast majority of the time, nothing happens. Unless it creates a real problem or someone brings it up and it actually goes against code. If you really want a nice tree in the right of way, the best thing to do would be contact urban forestry. We will plant and care for a much bigger tree than what you get from the community canopy program. However, if you wanted to plant a tree that you got from the community canopy program in the right of way, the only thing we would ask is give us a call, and we would send an arborist out and help advise you on maybe how to avoid underground utilities or other either above ground or underground structures or infrastructure that might eventually be impacted by that, or even some of your own things on your own property.
So if I can call you up, you'll come out and plant a tree, right?
Yeah, we have a right away. So we have 2 programs: the community canopy program, which I launched a few years back, twice a year, where you can go on the. It's a sort of a website that's designed for us by the Arbor Day Foundation. You use it, that sounds like, and you can choose your species of tree. Usually we try to have 3 or 4 options, and you do a little outline of your house, and then when you drag the tree, it shows you how much energy you might save in a year, and you plop it down, you order your tree, it gets delivered. That's different than our right-of-way planting program, where we will go out and identify sites either for replanting from trees that were removed sometimes, or we might just be looking to plant an area that needs trees. Those are much bigger. The community canopy program trees is a 1-gallon tree, yay high. What we typically plant in the right of way would be a 3-inch caliper tree. Now, a caliper is a measurement from the ground up 6 inches up to a 3-inch caliper tree. Anything above that in size, you measure it 12 inches from the ground. But we plant a 3-inch caliper tree, so that means the base of the tree is about yay big and maybe 10, 12 feet high. And then we have a watering truck that will come by and water that until it's established, usually a year and a half. And we have a range of options of species that we'll plant, and we will, we'll select from that range of options based on the site conditions. If it's something that you directly requested and you wanted to talk about the options, we'll do that. Otherwise, we'll probably if we're just going and doing it of our own volition, then we'll leave a door hanger telling you that we're planning to plant a tree there, and you can call us and talk about it if you want. Otherwise, we'll just plant it.
Okay, I'm curious, do you know how many trees you plant average per year, the city plants per year in those right-of-ways like that?
It's varied a little bit. I think this year we're, don't quote me because I haven't run the numbers lately, but maybe 400-ish.
That's cool. Yeah, I don't think people know that. That's
To answer this question, I lost a tree in Irma, and the city of Winter Park planted they planted a tree in that space that you're talking about, in the easement. And it's doing beautifully, and they have been very attentive to it. So I applaud you for that effort, because I have a beautiful new live oak. It's a little guy, but it's good. But my question is about the two protected ones, the cypress and the live oak, and they want it because they want their master suite bigger. But my question is, how many of these trees are taken down for aesthetics? Because we just walked through the garden and there's some sad-looking specimens. We might all have those in our yards, the laurels or the waters. So I wonder, how do we navigate that? Because we just don't like the way it looks.
Right. I'm a fan of ugly trees, by the way.
But from a city and in instrumenting the code and.
Yeah. And just to clarify a little bit or add to the information the mayor was giving. I should mention that tonight, right before we came over here, the commission voted unanimously on the rewrite of the new ordinance, and it went into effect immediately on being voted on. So thank you.
About 2 hours ago.
Yeah. So we have a new ordinance as of and so with the live oak and the live oak and bald cypress, that's a class of tree that was first directly requested by the tree board. I don't know, 4 years ago-ish, 3 years ago. Anyway, and it's an aspect of the ordinance that's been shown through peer-reviewed studies in the state of Florida and elsewhere that particular aspect of having a special class of trees that is more highly protected than other trees in the ordinance. Those cities that have that special class of trees tend to have a slower rate of canopy loss. Now that gives you a little bit of an idea of the fact that it's like canopy loss is very, very common, but slowing it down is a really big goal. So what we settled on was live oaks and bald cypress trees from fair to excellent condition, 30 inches diameter at breast height and above, are called landmark trees. And they require 3 times the mitigation and or compensation of a normal protected tree. So there's a number of other protected species that are also outlined in the ordinance, but we created this extra special class, and that's because, first of all, they're the most bang for the buck in terms of what they provide from an ecological standpoint, and they are most beloved and valued by the citizens of Winter Park, and they are also of the most valuable trees. They are the most threatened, right? So we have other trees that are protected, but this is we wanted to set aside a special class of trees that is really protected. So that's where the live oak bald cypress part comes. In terms of removing trees for aesthetics, people want to remove trees for all kinds of different reasons, and of course I have my own feelings about it, but that's not really the point. People can have their reasons, and they can be valid even if I disagree with them. But if they want to remove a tree for aesthetics and it's a protected species, it has to either be demonstrated through proper documentation by a certified arborist or landscape architect under the Florida Statute 163.045 and provided to the city if we ask for it, and then you can remove it and not have any mitigation or compensation. Or you have to get a permit from us that demonstrates the same thing that you would get if you did the statute. So you can think a tree is ugly. If it doesn't meet those standards under city ordinance, you can't remove it.
So let me ask, and maybe to the mayor, because you talked about fines earlier, how many people now consider tree removal just a cost of doing business? Paying a fine is just a part of, I'm going to build $1 million, $2 million house, and I don't care.
Unfortunately, too many. That's the real thing.
One in particular.
So what can we do?
We try to hit them with as high a fine. as much as we can. But if you're building a $20 million house and $100,000 it's cost to do business, it's just the way it is. It's not right, but that's just the truth.
And the city really has no recourse other than the fines.
When the tree's down, it's down, unfortunately. And so we see it afterwards, we require them to replant, and we require them to pay fines. Some won't replant, they just will pay the hefty fine.
If I could, can I loop in Catherine, because I think you could speak to this. So a lot of you might know about something that happened on the Isle of Sicily a couple years ago, where a property owner there took a lot that had probably several dozen really nice trees, and over the course of a few years removed every single tree on the lot and sidewalled all the trees of his neighbors that were over his lot. And so I want to make sure that, well, it's important that we're talking about ordinances and how urban forestry works, but one thing that I think is a really big part of the tour we just did and what we're here at Mead to learn about and remember is what that does to the natural environment. So maybe, Catherine, can you talk about like what kind of impacts the loss of that biological community, not just the trees, but the vegetation and the water and everything else on that lot can impact a small little isthmus like that?
I'll give it a try. That's a big order because it's very involved, and it's probably more complicated than we can even know how complicated it is. I would like to say a couple of things first, and that is that I really applaud the city for selecting the live oaks and the bald cypress because they do have big spreading canopies. They live a long time, 600 to 1,500 years for some of the live oaks and bald cypress. And they also provide habitat for so many of the insects that feed our birds. You know, we have in the spring birds nesting and they need the caterpillars. They need insects throughout the year to survive. So if we don't have trees, we're not going to have birds, and we all value that. And other wildlife as well. And I would like to mention that DBH, diameter at breast height, is 4.5 feet off the ground. So you can look at your own trees and determine what that is. And when we have tree canopy loss, then everything under there changes. Plants that were adapted to shade are dying off. You have to replant or they have to recruit to come back into that area. It's critical that we maintain those balances, and suddenly removing a lot of canopy is more destructive than just losing that shade or losing the view or losing the breeze through those trees. It's all a lot of interconnections that we may not even be aware of.
I know, I had a question in the back.
Can I just add for one second too? I'm just gonna read you straight from the ordinance. Tree removal financial compensation at section 58-286. Landmark trees shall require triple the rate of compensation established by the city commission and the fee schedule. So these fees are hefty.
This man.
So I think it's wonderful to select the bald cypress and the southern live oak as trees that should be protected. They've been around here a long time. They're wonderful. But for new developments, the southern live oak is probably not a good choice. And I decided not to buy a house in Winter Park because there was a beautiful southern live oak that went over the entire house, and I was like, oh no, I'm not going to buy a house with a tree that I can't cut down that could just go in the middle of my house. Instead, I bought a house in Baldwin Park where the geniuses that designed it had perhaps 3 choices of trees, only 3. So there's a southern live oak tree 8 feet from the corner of my house going right over my son's bedroom.
Right.
How do we get, and during the hurricane, he's sleeping on the sofa bed in the living room. How do we get government, legislatures, not just in Winter Park, but across Florida, to be educated of the choices by someone like Catherine Bowman, who really knows the trees, who knows the gradients of Mead Gardens, to say these trees at the entrance, you do not want a tree that's doing well at the entrance to be what you plant down by the water. How do we get these choices available to
to people who have to make a choice. They just want a tree. They want a tree next between their sidewalk and the street. They don't want the wrong tree. You don't want a southern live oak there. You do not. But you have to have a tree if you want the right thing. How do we make this more accessible? Because these are not small
You do
issues.
have Baldwin Park is around here, not the city one.
I absolutely know that. Yes. Yes, I know. I pay Orlando taxes.
I understand.
I
This
get
is
it.
Winter Park.
I get it. But not everyone here lives in Winter
Sure, but we're dealing with winter regulations.
Josh, can you answer
Yeah,
that?
no, that's,
That will link to the choices that are made.
Okay, let's let Josh answer.
yeah, no, that's a good point, and that's kind of what I was talking about a few minutes ago, where we're actively doing that all the time in Winter Park. My arborist, city arborist, and superintendent of urban forestry used to be me. We consult with homeowners and builders that are developing lots all the time about what would be a better choice. Choices besides southern live oak we're constantly pushing, both for in the rights of way and voluntarily for people who are developing lots that want other options. You're absolutely right. Like a lot of times with the sizes of the lots and then the houses that are on those lots and the other things around them, from stormwater retention, pools, cabanas, driveways, all of that, existing trees in the rights of way. There are many instances where a live oak is a poor choice, and we make a big effort to advise on that, not only for the benefit of the property owners, but also for the health of the overall urban forest. I mean, diversity, species and age diversity is a really important tenet of modern arboriculture, and part of that's because of novel pathogens that have come through our country for a couple hundred years. Dutch elm disease, the chestnut blight, emerald ash borer, the longhorn beetle, on and on and on. So if we were to have a novel pathogen sweep through central Florida that attacked all Quercus species, we could lose many, if in the worst case, like chestnut or Dutch elm or ash borer, it could kill all of them. So what you're raising is an absolutely valid and really important thing, and we're working on it all the time.
And understand, you don't have to plant a live oak, or only if you take one down. But if you're building and you're in a development, there's all kinds of trees you can plant. It doesn't have to be these. These are just existing beautiful trees. And I'll give you a good example on Park Avenue, along the where the stores are and restaurants. Years ago, 20 years ago, they planted beautiful live oaks. The landscape architect suggested something different, and they should have put something different in, because now we have to tear up that whole area. The roots are digging up all the sidewalks are coming up, people are tripping, the streets. It's not the tree's fault, they're beautiful and they're growing, but that wasn't the right tree for there. So we hear you and understand. We're just saying these are the trees that are in a special protected class, and if you take them down, you're gonna have to pay a fine, unless it falls down naturally, or you have an arborist say it's dying. But that doesn't mean the developer has to put those up.
I think we have time for one more question. Todd?
Thank you. So I can't ask this of Mayor DeCiccio, obviously, because this isn't a public meeting, but currently we have about 25% of the city will never be undergrounded because they're either on OUC power or Duke power. And the other thing is we have about 1,600 septic tanks in Winter Park, and they're scattered around. People with very big houses in the villas have septic tanks. My neighborhood has septic tanks. So these two classes of trees that we're talking about, bald cypress and Quercus virginiana, they have very shallow roots. So my question, I guess, would be to Josh. He would be the right one to answer. Should there be any incentive for Winter Park to take down the power lines and underground them and get off of septic tanks, because roots tend to go into septic fields? And is that a viable option, and is that a good argument to do those two things?
I don't know what my first thought, of course, and I'm sure we would have thought of this. I don't know how we would work with Duke and OUC to do that. I know that we did work with Duke to underground their transmission on Fairbanks, so I know it's possible to partner with other municipal entities and get their cooperation. Especially if it benefits them to some degree, which you would think undergrounding their lines would. So that's an interesting idea. And then with the septic, that's a tricky one too. We try to be very cognizant. I'm generally aware of what parts of the city have septic versus sewer, and try to make sure that my staff are aware also. I think I can see where you're going with that being an incentive. Since that's sort of outside of my wheelhouse in terms of getting it done, I can say that it would be an advantage in that it would give us more options of trees to plant in those areas, because we clearly don't want to plant bald cypress and live oaks under power lines or right up against a drain field, even though they would probably like that.
They do.
I think that would be a great idea. I guess it just comes down to interagency cooperation.
Maybe one more. Adriana, we have a.
Hey, so you said that you replant the oaks and the cypresses once the developer takes one down. But I wanted to ask, what kind of, is it a live oak or a bald cypress, and how old is it? And how, yeah.
Like in terms of what is replanted?
Yes.
They have, so we don't have to replant a bald cypress if you plant a bald cypress, or a live oak if you plant a live oak. We have if
you cut them down, do you replant the same species?
you don't have to replant the same species necessarily. We have a list of approved species, and some are defined as canopy trees, and some are defined as understory. Under the ordinance, we have the ability in the Urban Forestry Division to approve 2 understory trees for 1 canopy tree, rather than 1 canopy tree, if we deem that there's no appropriate place on the site to plant a canopy tree. But beyond that, as long as they select from the list of approved species, and they meet the requirements in terms of how many canopy and or, if approved, understory trees that are required under the tree removal permit, they can select from a range of different species, which kind of goes to what our other questioner asked earlier, in that there are instances where you might remove. There aren't a whole lot of bald cypress that get approved for removal, because most of them are nowhere near the building footprint and they don't tend to have defects, but that's a sidebar. But there are plenty of instances where you might remove a live oak because it is permitted, but there's a number of different factors by which you can have a tree removed. And then once you build the home, it really might not be appropriate for a live oak, and so we do want to make sure that we have a range of options for them to replant, and in the spirit of trying to get as much bang for the buck. So if we can't get a live oak, but there's room for a shade tree, you can choose from those options of shade trees, but we might not allow you to replant an understory, 2 understories for that shade tree. So it gets into a little bit of horse trading, as long as it stays within the general framework. And that goes back to, smart development, advising people as to what makes sense on their lot, and then also getting as much canopy back as possible. If there is an option, as long as you've hit the minimum required amount of shade trees on a lot, and you can't plant anymore, then there is an option to pay the remainder of the compensation into the tree trust fund, which the city then uses to plant trees in other parts of the city. But we would much rather have people planting a tree or trees on a residential lot than to take money and pay for it in somewhere that we're going to plant a tree anyway.
And Catherine might tell you there's certain soils that would be better for certain trees, right?
Oh, sure. I think you have some of that information in your little handouts from tonight. Is that not only that's something to help you choose the right plant, right tree for your right place. Consider the size, consider the soils. Some trees are adapted to moisture soils, some to music soils, some to extremely dry soils. You have to take a look at what you have on your property, but you're right. We want diversity and things to go in the right place.
So I want to thank our panel tonight. We've come to the end. And I know we have many, many more questions, so they will be here. But first, the big surprise, right? If you look underneath your seat and you have a green tag, then you have won a cypress tree that's out front.